All right, so you can sit down and you can wave a magic wand and you can become Steve Jobs or some amazing billionaire inventor ahead of the game. And 25 years from now, look back and say, if we did this 25 years ago, education would be massively different. What would it be?
I would give complete control of the education to local communities, however we end up defining those. So what happens in Indianapolis is great, what happens in Gary is great, Fort Wayne, Connorsville, whatever, let them figure out what they want schooling to look like in their own community. If that looks different than it does the next community over, that's fine with me. Let them figure out what they want, how they keep people in their communities, and roll the dice.
Can you do that fairly?
I don't know, but I don't care. I'm saying each community should be able to do what they want to do, because ultimately, you know, me imposing my community standards on somebody else's community standards, one, hasn't worked very well because I've been doing that for a long time, and two, I'm not sure it's what we want anyway. I'm not sure that's fair.
I think I'll go even more extreme. I'll give it directly to parents. You know, so let parents decide, hey, if a group of us decide we want to do this, or this is how education for our kids looks, so be it. If another group wants to do something else, but truly empower parents, truly put parents in control of it, and just let them run and see what happens. Because I mean, I think there are some parents that have these conversations with their kids and do whatever they can do to kind of push their kids in the direction that they want to go. And there are some parents that don't have those conversations. And I think if we really put families back into the driver's seats, we'll see our youth actually doing some really cool, really great things, because their minds are just so wide open. And I think a lot of times we're trying to force them to comply.
Right.
And we lose a lot of that great creativity that, you know, is in this generation.
Do you think that, so you look at that and you think, okay, that's relying on trusting families and parents, you know, and communities more than anything else. Do you think that's actually doable? Do you think that you know, what about the people who say that, you know, these folks can't really understand how to do it. These folks don't understand. Communities aren't the right drivers of this. Right. How do you respond to that?
I think we have to trust families and parents to know what's best for their child. They know what the needs are, what their hopes and wishes and dreams are for that child, so we have to put the ownership there, and the accountability will follow. Schools will start being more accountable if parents have more choice, and I think that's the route that we can go. I look forward to, in 25 years, saying, wow, people can live wherever they like. We don't have to worry about redlining or zip code assigned schools. We can just, right now we're kind of doing this chicken and egg of, does a neighborhood improve because the school has improved, or did the school improve because the neighborhood did? And I'd like to see that happening everywhere in every community, because people can pick up and move, or it doesn't even matter where they live, they can go wherever they like.
Yeah, I mean, I love that, and you know me, I think there shouldn't be anything like a school, right? I think the way we look at schooling now is like, well, we look at school as opposed to schooling and education, right? And Milton's always used to say that, right? He used to say, not all education is schooling, and not all schooling is education, right? Or actually, I think it was more like, not all learning is schooling, and not all schooling is learning.
Right. I'd say life's messy. You know, it may not work out for everybody, but the reality is, it's never going to work out for everybody all the time.
Right.
Even if we try to impose that, that's just an impossible standard to meet. And so, I think we need to stop worrying about that so much, and worry about what can we do to let people take control of their lives and live whatever life they want to live. Right. I mean, I've got a 16-year-old who is completely disengaged from school at the moment, and he doesn't know why he's doing it. And truthfully, I don't have a good answer for him, other than say, it's because I said so. You know, go do well in this because that's my expectation. I wish he would respond to that, but he's looking around the world going, I don't know. I see this guy, I want to be an entrepreneur. I see these guys, and I see this other thing happening. And the world's different than it was from the people who typically are making policy, who've been through it for 20, 25 years, and they think they've learned enough. But you gotta let people run their own stuff.
Right. And I think you hit on something perfect. You know, when you look at 20 years ago, if you walked into a school building, it looks almost the same as if you walked into one today.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
25 years from now, I would love for us to not even be able to tell what a school is.
Right.
Because that means now it's truly meeting the needs of those kids, that particular generation. And it's not, you know, hey, 25 seats in the classroom, there's, you know, 15 classrooms in this building, but it's actually truly getting to a point to where it could be outside, you know, it could be in a room like this, but now we're actually truly bringing education to people and letting them decide this is what education looks for me.
Right.
Yeah, it's like dynamic, it's innovative, it's not like it is. And like now innovation is, oh look, we've got a handheld computer in our classroom.
Right.
Isn't that exciting, right?
Yeah,
You know,
we don't have the chalkboard, we have this digital whiteboard, but still in the front of the classroom.
Which,
and
by the
have
way, the teachers who've been there for 30 years are still using it just like the old chalkboard. I mean, like maybe we should have term limits on teachers, right? You know, like say, hey, look, we're going to pay you well, you get 20 years, and then you're out. And then we're going to get the next group, but let's pay them well. You know, maybe that's the way you do it. You entice people to go do it, and then you give those people a way to do something else. But I mean, I hear that complaint from my kids all the time. Oh, so-and-so's been here for 20 years, and they don't know how to use Zoom, you know, or whatever. It's like, yeah, I get it, because they were never taught how to do that, and they don't want to. But like, are those the kinds of things that we could free people up to do to make it truly a place where you want to be, and not just a machine that you got to go to every day?
there's all these old like ideas. I think back to my second son. Now, my sons obviously were very different, but my second son, super capable, likes doing intellectual thing. And I remember a couple things like the sort of compliance thing you were talking about, right? So, he's got to do schoolwork. So do your homework, son, every night between 7 and 9. Get going with that. So one day I remember I'm listening, and I'm hearing a bunch of talking when he's supposed to be doing his homework. And I'm like, what the heck are you doing up here, man? He goes, oh, we're just FaceTiming to discuss with a bunch of kids how this assignment should be done. I'm like, oh, okay, so you're actually sort of self-educating and self-regulating. And then I sort of started thinking, my son could have probably learned more just by watching YouTube rather than going to high school, right?
So like,
You see
the
it.
fact that you hit on that, my 6-year-old will watch stuff on YouTube and come back to me and like, Daddy, did you know such and such and such? And just has this rich imagination from stuff that he's seen on YouTube, where he's looking at principles that he probably wouldn't even learn until he got to middle school. As a 6th grader. I mean, he knows anatomy. Like, he will tell you, so this is what happens when germs enter your body. He was telling me more stuff about COVID at 5, 6 years old. And, they're not teaching that in kindergarten or 1st grade. But if we were restrictive and said, no, you have to pay attention to what they're teaching in this building, he wouldn't have any of that interest.
Yes, I think technology connects us so much more now. If you need a class and it's not offered at your school, find a different place and allow that money to pay that person to teach the course to your child so you're not stuck. I think another interesting thing on technology is it's very hard to ground your children from technology these days because they're using it all for their homework or for
And I always talk a lot about how here's where we are, here's where we want to go. How do we get from here to there, right? And so EdChoice is sort of trying to do that in a way. And so I guess what I'd be interested in hearing from all of you guys have worked with EdChoice for a long time, right? Some are newer, some have been for a while. What is the passion that keeps you at EdChoice? Is it to get to that vision? Is it to create more empowerment? I'd be interested to hear about that.
Absolutely. I work at EdChoice and keep going for one reason, and that is for children. And for them to find the best fit for them to be able to explore and learn and get the services that they need. And so when you're having a rough day or legislation's not going your way or you're getting beat up on the opposite side, just imagining a child walking into the new opportunity that they need that fits them, that's what keeps me going. and talking to families who move and realize, oh my gosh, I moved into an environment where I have no choice, and they're ready to change the law in that new state where they live. That keeps me going.
I remember I came to EdChoice, well, our predecessor, Freedman Foundation,
Yes, correct.
20-odd years ago, and I was sort of drawn by the idea of this sort of individual freedom because it made sense to me that, because I didn't have kids at the time, so I didn't really understand how schools worked and didn't care to. I was just going to argue that people should be able to choose whichever one they wanted. And I did that, and it was fun. And I think what's fun about the whole experience, as I think back on it, was back then, I mean, you and I were running around the country trying to get anybody to listen to us. I mean, anybody, literally. Like,
Yeah, literally
you could call us and we would jump on a plane and get you because you were actually willing to talk to us. It was like being a salesman in a business that, you know, you're just waiting for the phone to ring.
And the first years were never fun, right? It was
Right.
like New Mexico,
Exactly, you know,
Milwaukee,
it
and
was not
Cleveland.
sexy
right?
travel,
There was no
you know.
sexy travel back then.
No.
But it was a lot of fun to go out and see it, and then you see a little bit of the incremental growth over the years, and now the explosion that we're seeing now. So, but the problem still exists, is that this big system that we keep thinking is going to be tweaked enough to work for everybody just doesn't ever work, and I don't have any faith it ever will, which is why I keep thinking I want to get there and try to give one kid at a time, or whatever group we can get at a time, the opportunity to pick their school, and whether it works for them, you know, I hope it does. I mean, and I think it will, but. Ultimately, you can't have that opportunity unless you just get the freedom to make your own choice and control your own destiny. And I think that's why I have come back several times to this work and have been around it for so long.
I mean, I'm the new kid on the block in this group, and kind of like Carrie, you know, I do this work for my kids and for kids. And what I think, you know, truly sets us apart and how we go about doing this work. We're not afraid to have those challenging conversations. We're not afraid to invite others in the room. And I think the only way that we actually move to that point to where parents truly have the ability to do what they want to do with their kids' education is to continue having those challenging conversations. If you're not having dialogue with people that don't think like you, you'll never learn, you'll never grow. And I think so many groups have been just kind of in their silos of here's what we want to do, and it has to be this way. And we bring this notion to the conversation of let's all sit down, let's talk about our experiences, and let me show how the choices that you had are the same thing that these families are asking for. How can we make this a level playing field to where everybody gets to do what's best for their kids?
And you know, sorry, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say, I had what Oprah liked to call back in the day the aha moments. I worked from Gary, Indiana down to Evansville in 19 different school districts in our state. And I would go in one district and see reading curriculum one way, and then I would drive an hour away and see a different curriculum. And I just was noticing all the disparities between the districts, and just thinking about in 10 years, where will these kids be in our workforce? Right. And I wanted to so work in the system to make change, but I quickly realized I had to do this work from outside of the system to really impact change, because I thought I would stick in that system. And one day I was in a teacher's lounge, and the teachers were complaining that they had drawn the new boundaries and the school was going to take in the trailer park children. And these teachers were talking, and I still had my rose-colored glasses on. I thought teachers were on this great pedestal and they would never think this. And the teachers said, oh man, next year we're getting stuck with those kids. And my heart sank, and I thought, no, those kids are getting stuck with you. Yeah, and that was my moment to say, we need choice, we need freedom, we need kids not to be restricted somewhere that they're not loved in this building.
That's right.
Like Carrie may have heard me say this story, like when I first moved here and realized that, you know, I've been here 16 years now, but we didn't have full-time kindergarten.
Yeah.
And when I was hiring for some of the marketing programs I was doing, I was always like, it's like everybody that I come in and talk to is like they're a couple years behind. And then it hit me was like, most of you guys didn't start school until you were 7. I'm like, I'm an 80s baby, and at 5, I was full-day kindergarten. And that kind of helped me understand, like, you know, the fact that you don't have to start school from a policy standpoint until you're 7. That really got me into there are policies that really change how our kids are being educated. And one, like you said, what happens to them when they become adults and they actually get to that point to where they're in a working society. Yeah. If we're not really paying attention to those policies and adjusting things and making sure that they're equitable and everybody has access, and it's going to affect our future.
Robert, let me ask you a question. You've been here since the day one. I mean, 25 years. What keeps you going every day?
So what keeps me going every day is, I mean, first of all, I just love the people we work with, right? I mean, and as we were talking, I kept thinking about that, and I think this is part of our culture. As iron sharpens iron, so we try to sharpen each other, right? And so I love that back and forth. But also, that's the kind of attitude we take into the rest of our work and into the work. So I'm so blessed to be at EdChoice for 25 years because ultimately my why is because I got lucky, right? There is no reason in God's green earth I should have been given the education opportunities that I did, because I certainly don't feel like I'm smart enough, right? Certainly don't know if I would have gotten it outside of having a family that had some semblance of wealth and power in Southern Indiana. So it just struck me from the very beginning that the way we set up our system is so unjust and so not towards kids and so not towards equity or distribution opportunity. And then I sort of met this opportunity in Milton Friedman, when I'm like, how do these two things come together? And they come together really simply because Milton's idea was everyone should be empowered to have their own self-determination, their own ability to run their own lives outside of what he would say would be an oppressive system. And so I'm like, wow, this is the marriage of this sort of idea of justice and this idea of liberty that I think is amazing. And so my why is I want every family and every kid to have the same opportunity I did, and we won't get there until every family can choose. I mean, that's my why. I mean, I would love to have, my kids now are on through school, and we got lucky I could afford choices, but a lot of people can't. And I just, this idea of having an education based on where you live just is so wrong, right? And so I don't know how we don't, as a society, recognize how wrong that is. And so my why is to, as you hear me say all the time, I want to upend the nature of how we deliver education in America. So.
Okay, last one, wrap it up, because you gotta do the next one.
Oh.
Your moonshots were kind of boring, sorry.
Yeah.
Craziest idea of your education, you know, with something insane, 25 years, one sentence. Go around.
Okay. I have mine.
Go on.
Every parent is handed their education savings account debit card with all the per pupil spending for them. They carry it around in their wallet. They determine what services they'd like, or they determine if they like a school building they'd like their child to go into, but they're not limited to where they live. And they just swipe, 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 and pick the education that fits their child the best.
One more time.
Okay, every, what?
He's coughed, that's why one more time. Go.
Oh. Every family in America receives their education savings account debit card, and this card has their per pupil funding for their students. They determine what education vendors they use, or if they want to send their kid to a school, and they just swipe, 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 and get all the services that fit their child's needs.
To me, it's like an education Amazon, right? So the future for me is an education Amazon. So like I'm going on, like I always say this, I'm online, and Amazon already knows 18 things I want, right? We can't do that in education. That's crazy. So to me, the moonshot is like kids getting online every morning, picking out how they're choosing their education that day, figuring it out themselves. It's like, well, today I'm going over this school, or today I'm going to this park, or today I'm doing this, because this is my graduation pathway, right? Because they get to determine it.
And I'll feed off that. There are no state standards, no federal guidelines, nobody tells you what you want to learn. You just decide what you want to learn, and you just live your life that way.
Yeah, I think I'm just building on what you guys are saying. It's like you walk into a mall now, you have all these different retailers, but you walk into a mall and you have all these different education providers. And families, kids can decide, hey, I want to actually go learn about, I'm going to use Apple. I'm going to go to the Apple store today to do my education. Tomorrow I'll go to Microsoft, or I'll go to Finish Line, or I'll go to this store. But it becomes that to where you're picking what you want to do from an education standpoint, and it can change day by day.
Yeah.
We have all these speakeasies nowadays. Why do we have that for K-12 education? Why can't just say, yeah, kid goes in there, hey, look, here's what I'm learning today, right? And so it's totally self-directed, but it's there because the information's out there, right? Now, and the idea that somehow the person in front of the classroom that's been the same way for 250 years needs to curate that information is so yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, I think you go back to, you look at business incubators, what's great about them, and even venture capitalists, they love putting big thought leaders, these super imaginative people in the same room and saying, hey, figure it out. You guys just come up with whatever you want to come up with. That to me is how the future of education should look. So allowing kids to decide, hey, here's what I want to learn today. But you know what, Brian? I know you're working on that. How about after we both go to our different schools,
Right.
we come together and just talk about what we learned and see what we can create from that. And I think that's what will push society way forward. You know, we go back and watch cartoons from 20, 30 years ago. You had the Jetsons and how their future was supposed to look, and Looney Tunes. Here's the future of tomorrow. And a lot of us thought that we would be seeing a lot of those things today. And I think the reason we don't is because we have this groupthink. We've been told, here's how we need to move, versus truly like taking the lid off and just letting people be imaginative.
Like the world is a gigantic classroom.
Yeah.
Right?